Hey, welcome. It's Brian, and this is Guitar Solo Reactions. Today we're back with the incredible Frank Zappa and his band, The Mothers of Invention. This is live in LA in 1974. I believe this was broadcast on like a public television channel in the LA area. And if you're a fan of Frank, you've seen probably all of this whole concert. But this was broken down into just the one song we're going to do today, which is Florentine Pogen, which of course was on One Size Fits All. And to me, this is the peak band, this era, this kind of, the members in this band were my favorite era of Frank's stuff. As far as the players, whether it's George Duke, Ruth Underwood, Chester Thompson on drums, Tom Fowler on bass, Napoleon Murphy Brock on vocals and flute and saxophone, and of course, Frank on guitar. I don't think I forgot anyone. But I love George Duke in the band. Just always really fun to watch and such an amazing player. And all of them are such amazing players. So with that said, here we go. Florentine Pogen. I think what might slightly bug me about this concert, this whole thing, is like, well, specifically the song, is the tempo is a lot slower, or it feels slower, and it's a fun version, and maybe they're playing it a little bit safe, but like Frank's guitar tone, like if you listen to You Can't Do That on Stage Volume 2 and the Helsinki live concert, and Frank isn't even using his normal gear. I can't remember what happened to it. I think it, was destroyed or lost or something, and everybody had to get rented gear. I think that's the story. But his tone on that is insane, and that is the one record I recommend to anyone that loves to hear or wants to hear Frank and the band, this specific band at their prime, and that recording is incredible. So I could be wrong, but that, I think when I've watched this before, it's always kind of stood out as tempo. The energy's a little bit lower, and Frank's guitar tone is not that visceral, over the top that I love. And I could be wrong. We'll wait till like there's more guitar playing. But...
She was the daughter of a wealthy Florentine Pogen. Freedom and weep was her adjustable slogan. She was a debutante, Daisy with a color note organ. Deep in the street, she drove a 59 Morgan. Whoa, that's the kind of step she takes. With her hot waist, hot When her crab cakes.
She didn't like it when her fan belt shrunk and got shorter.
Ointment.
Battery leaks could nearly cost her a quarter. She didn't want to go home and watch the pesto go mortar. Later she speaks on how Pirellis might court her. She was the daughter of a wealthy Florentine Pogen. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think what makes this band so special, not only just the great players, but I thought Napoleon Murphy Brock was the best frontman for the band, and obviously Frank did some singing at certain points, more of talking, I guess, in some songs, but he just was ultimately so great at the singing part. Now, Adrian Blue, when he was in the band very shortly, I thought he was a great singer and is a great singer. Actually, he's kind of better now than he's ever been. If you've seen him with the Jerry Harrison Remain in the Light tour, made that entire thing incredible, or Discipline, the kind of half of the 80s King Crimson thing. But Napoleon Murphy Brock always has my vote. Ike Willis obviously did a lot of the 80s stuff. I thought he's a great singer. Ray White as well, but Napoleon is my guy.
Justice Gorilla. She go. Justice Gorilla. She go. Justice Gorilla. She go. Ooh. Justice Gorilla. She go.
there you have it, Frank and the band doing a pretty great version of Florentine Pogen. And what I would say is, like, there's nobody that does that today for sure. With that level of musicianship, kind of the entertainment factor, and always makes me smile watching and hearing Napoleon Murphy Brock. As far as that solo, the guitar solo was pretty long, which is great. But from my perspective, I could be wrong. I don't know what he thought about this particular show. Um, but guitar tone wise, if you're on a stage and it feels good, you play better. This kind of strikes me as like not a guitar failure or a guitar, his playing failure or equipment failure, but sometimes it feels better than others. And I could just tell it didn't have that little extra oomph that he would usually have. Now, in the 80s and stuff like that, he did a lot of clean guitar solos with no distortion, but with lots of effects. And I was lucky to see him on the last tour in 88 in Michigan. And, I just remember how incredibly loud it was. Not in a bad way, but it was just this like huge sound. And here it just, this is 1974. Amp technology, amps were pretty inconsistent and needed a lot of, um, I don't know if people were as trying to switch tubes and all of this stuff that people would go on to do in the 90s and 80s. And I mean, Marshalls in general are not a super high gain amp. So at least these versions, the 70s versions, these are probably late 60s, probably at this point. But anyway, you know what I'm saying. If you play guitar, they're not what we would associate with like the late 80s, kind of the hot rodded Marshall JCM 800s, which had more gain than maybe what these are. I'm not even sure what they are. But um, uh, anyway, my point is the tone to me kind of falls a little bit flat, and that makes it a lot harder to kind of do what he is best at, which isn't necessarily high gain, but having that amount of volume and gain to kind of have the notes sing longer, more feedback. He was great at manipulating feedback, and that's kind of a part of his sound, at least from this era onward till he stopped playing guitar, in my opinion. And I happen to have a book, the Zappa Gear book, right here. And so I've referenced this, and I didn't reference it before I watched this, but I will afterwards. But always kind of a fun thing for a guy who really, much like Eddie Van Halen in a certain way, Frank really modified a lot of guitars. Uh, Eddie Van Halen, I think, was trying to find the best tool for what he wanted to hear in his head tone wise. Frank, I think, was always exploring. Like, he had lots of onboard preamps and parametric EQs and like that green ringer and all sorts of cool stuff. Whether or not they sounded great, I don't, always know exactly what he was playing on certain things, but he was a great experimenter in texture, is when it comes to effects. And then you think of someone like Adrian Belew, who went on and used effects to more of like a sound effect sense, where Frank was doing textures, and Robert Fripp and guitars, synth, Pat Metheny, El Di Meola, John McLaughlin, all using that, and David Torn using looping and stuff like that. But I think if Frank would have played guitar, and if he would have lived, till let's say now, I'm not sure would have been playing guitar much past when he passed away, but I think he would have definitely been someone that tinkered and kind of went into that guitar synth. And he did some kind of early synth stuff. I don't know if it actually exists on record, but he did use some of that stuff. I'm just saying, like, now with all of the cool things you could do with basically your laptop, I think he would have loved that. And, as far as manipulating guitar tones and all of that. So anyway, um, I appreciate if you watch this whole thing. That's really cool. If you're a Frank fan, so am I. And he's probably always in my top five guitar players. And um, composers as well. I don't know as me when I say guitar players, like he definitely influenced my guitar playing. Maybe not compositionally or whatever, but he's always been in that top five with Tony Iommi, Randy Rhoads, John McLaughlin, um, Ted Nugent probably in there somewhere in that top 5 to 10, but Robert Fripp. But Frank is always, when I usually say my top five, it's Robert Fripp, Frank Zappa, Tony Iommi, and I'll say Randy Rhoads, but I don't know if that's an influence. But Bill Frisell kind of comes in and out of that top five. But Frank is always in there with Robert Fripp. So that's what I'll say. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.